Live from London, this is BBC News. Aid agencies warn it's almost impossible to help civilians in southern Gaza after Israeli forces move into Rafah, sealing off the two main crossings into the city. These are the pictures live from Rafah, where people anxiously await news of the latest ceasefire talks. Ukrainian intelligence says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Zelensky, reportedly timed for President Putin's inauguration. Donald Trump is back in New York as Stormy Daniels is due to appear on the witness stand.
I'm outside the court in New York in what promises to be one of the most dramatic days of testimony.
And floral extravagance on the red carpet as stars attend the Met Gala in New York. Hello, I'm Annita McVeigh and welcome to Verified Live for the next 3 hours. All the main stories and checking out the facts behind them. The United Nations says Israel isn't allowing humanitarian workers access to the Rafah crossing after Israeli defense forces took control of the Gaza side of the crossing with Egypt. International aid agents say the closing of the Rafah crossing, as well as the other main crossing, Kerem Shalom, makes it virtually impossible to assist civilians inside the enclave. These pictures have been issued by the Israeli Defense Forces, which says their troops are carrying out a limited operation in Rafah. They say they've killed several Hamas fighters and have destroyed a number of tunnels. And with more on the Israeli operation in Rafah, let's cross to our team at BBC Verify and our correspondent Merlin Thomas, who's been looking at the images released by the IDF. Merlin, thank you very much. Well, let's go live to Jerusalem now. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner is there. Frank, hello to you. What's the status of the negotiations right now to try to get a deal over the line in these, tricky, within the context of a very tricky situation on the ground? Laura, thank you very much. Laura Blumenfeld there, Middle East analyst. And let me just tell you that you can follow all the latest on what's happening in Gaza, the developing and continuing to develop situation on the ground there, and the response in Israel as well as elsewhere. You can do that on the BBC News app and website. We've got a live page there with all the developments as they happen around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News. Adult actress Stormy Daniels, the person at the centre of the first criminal trial of a former US president, Donald Trump, is being called as a witness today. It comes as prosecutors continue to argue the former president was responsible for illegally covering up a hush money payment to the porn star in the run-up to the 2016 election. And we're just hearing, you may know that Prince Harry is in the UK. This is in relation to his Invictus Games, various appointments that he's attending in relation to that. But we are hearing that the Duke will not meet with his father, King Charles, while in the UK this week. A spokesperson for Prince Harry saying, unfortunately, it will not be possible due to the King's full programme. He says the Duke is understanding of his father's diary of commitments and various other priorities and hopes to see him soon. Ukrainian intelligence says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Zelensky. It's arrested 2 colonels from the government protection unit suspected of passing on secret information to a Russian FSB cell. James Waterhouse told us more. James Waterhouse in the Ukrainian capital. Do stay with us here on BBC News for coverage of all the day's main news. Hello, this is BBC News, the headlines for you. And aid agencies warn it's almost impossible to help civilians in southern Gaza after Israeli forces move into Rafah, sealing off the 2 main crossings into the city. The porn star at the centre of Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York has been called as a witness today. Stormy Daniels, we're just hearing, has taken the witness stand. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records and denies a sexual encounter with Ms. Daniels. Vladimir Putin is sworn in as Russia's president for a 5th time, extending his quarter-of-a-century rule over Russia by another 6 years. And a British woman pleads guilty to being part of a global monkey torture network. Go to sport. Tanya Arnold has the latest. Hi, Tanya.
Annita, thanks ever so much. We'll learn the first of the 2 Champions League finalists later as Paris Saint-Germain meet Borussia Dortmund in the second leg of their semi-final. For your sport for now, Annita.
Tanya, thank you very much. Israeli forces, as we've been reporting, have taken control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing with Egypt as their grand operation in the southern city continues. There were celebrations in Rafah last night after Hamas agreed to a ceasefire and a hostage release deal. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv to demand Benjamin Netanyahu accept the truce, but he said the draft didn't meet Israel's demands. I'm joined now by Sharon Lifshitz, who's in Tel Aviv. And Sharon, thank you very much for your time. You are waiting for news of your 84-year-old father, Oded. And what would you like Mr. Netanyahu to do at this point? Obviously, you had some hope that you were approaching the point where a deal might be made to release the hostages. Reda, thank you very much for your time. Reda Al-Haddad, a media and communications officer at Oxfam, based in the Gaza Strip. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let me just tell you that Scotland's Parliament has approved John Swinney as the country's new First Minister a day after he was named leader of the Scottish National Party. Mr Swinney succeeds Humza Yousaf, who formally resigned from the role of First Minister earlier in the day following his announcement last week that he would step down. So John Swinney approved by the Holyrood Parliament in Scotland as the country's new First Minister after a vote. He will formally become First Minister a little later. A British woman has pleaded guilty to being part of an international monkey torture network. Holly Legresley participated in a private online group that was paying people in Indonesia to abuse and kill baby monkeys on video. Let's speak to our reporter Rebecca Henschke, who's been in court today. And Rebecca, tell us a bit more about what's happened. A really horrific case.
There were.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The adult film star Stormy Daniels is giving evidence in Donald Trump's hush money trial.
I'm outside the court with the very latest of what promises to be a dramatic day of testimony.
Aid agencies warn it's almost impossible to help civilians in southern Gaza after Israeli forces move into Rafah, sealing off the two main crossings into the city. And these are pictures live from Rafah, where people anxiously await news of the latest ceasefire talks. Ukrainian intelligence says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Zelensky, reportedly timed for President Putin's inauguration. And floral extravagance on the red carpet as stars attend the Met Gala in New York. Hello and welcome. I'm Annita McVeigh and this is Verified Live, 3 hours of checking out the day's main stories and the facts behind them. Adult film actress Stormy Daniels, the person at the centre of the first criminal trial of a former US president, Donald Trump, has begun giving evidence in court. She's been called as a witness as prosecutors continue to argue the former president was responsible for illegally covering up a hush money payment to Miss Daniels in the run-up to the 2016 election. OK, Nawaf Al-Thani, thank you very much for your thoughts on this continuing story today. And we have just heard that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said basically a repetition of what he said earlier, that Hamas's proposal falls far short of Israel's essential demands. That just in. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Now, I just want to take you live to the House of Commons here in London because the UK Defence Secretary, we're expecting him to speak in a few minutes. That's Grant Shapps. He's due to make a statement about a hack which has compromised the payroll system of the British Armed Forces. Government officials have told the BBC that China was most likely responsible, something the Chinese Foreign Ministry has dismissed as absurd. China's President Xi in Europe at the moment. He's in France. He's been having lunch with President Macron in the Pyrenees. So China dismissing the idea that it could be behind this hack as absurd. But we are expecting a statement from the UK Defence Secretary coming up in a short while. And we'll bring that to you. And do stay with us here on BBC News. Just a reminder that we are expecting a statement from the UK Defence Secretary. This is about a hack which has compromised the payroll system of the British Armed Forces. Government officials have told the BBC that China was most likely responsible, something China has dismissed as absurd.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
A new era for Disney, so says boss Bob Iger, as the firm's streaming division finally turns a profit 6 months earlier than it promised Wall Street. Pressure in the pipeline, BP profits slumped by more than expected, raising further questions about the oil giant's strategy. Plus, back on the radar for US regulators, Boeing faces a new safety investigation, this time over the 787 Dreamliner. Hello, welcome. This is Business Today. I'm Ben Thompson, and we're going to start with news from Disney because we have turned a corner. That's according to the boss of Disney, a message to investors from Bob Iger as the entertainment giant raises its profit forecast for the year. It's revealed that its film and TV streaming business has turned a profit for the first time. Well, Disney launched its Disney Plus service back in 2019 to compete with Netflix and adapt to the changing way that we get our entertainment. but it has been losing money since then. Disney promised Wall Street that those losses would turn to profits by September, but take a look at this. Disney's entertainment streaming division made a profit of $47 million. Now that's between January and March, compared to a loss of $587 million this time last year. So out of the red 6 months ahead of schedule. Michelle Fleury is in New York taking a closer look at all of this for us. And Michelle, give us a sense of what Disney have told us. It's quite a turnaround in delivering that profit much earlier than expected. Michelle, as always, good to talk to you. Thank you. Michelle Fleury there live in New York. Now, elsewhere, the oil giant BP has reported a slump in profits for the first 3 months of the year. It made $2.7 billion between January and March. Now, that's down 40% on the same period last year. The results will put more pressure on BP's new boss, who took over just in January. Well, part of the slump can be put down to lower oil prices. But as our business editor Simon Jack explains, arch UK rival Shell is doing much better than BP, and it raises some big questions for shareholders about the company's strategy. Business editor Simon Jack there. Now to new safety questions that are facing the aircraft giant Boeing. Regulators in America have opened another investigation into the firm after it acknowledged that it may not have carried out proper quality inspections on its 787 Dreamliner aircraft. Well, that comes on top of a probe that was launched earlier this year into the safety of its 737 MAX planes. That was after a door panel blew out on one of the jets shortly after takeoff. Leadership expert Chris Roebuck told us it's another example of Boeing's problematic corporate culture. Chris Roebuck there. Now here, the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who is hoping to take over as Finance Minister in this year's general election, has accused the government of gaslighting the British people over the state of the economy. In a speech to business leaders, she said that the government's claims that their economic plan is working are deluded. Some other business stories we're following for you this hour, and the Swiss banking giant UBS has made its first quarterly profit since it rescued struggling Credit Suisse last year. It made $1.8 billion between January and March. That follows 2 quarters of steep losses. Nintendo has posted record profits thanks to the weak yen, but it warns that earnings will slump nearly 40% this year. The video games giant says it will reveal a successor to the hit Nintendo Switch console later this year. First-time buyers and homeowners looking to remortgage in the UK are still facing a significant challenge, according to the lender Halifax. Mortgage rates have been on the rise again on expectations the Bank of England will make fewer interest rate cuts this year. Halifax says the average UK house price was up just 0.1% in April, with a typical home now valued at just under £289,000. Now, when Britain left the European Union, the government said that food and drink exporters had a golden opportunity to put British food at the top of the global menu. But the reality is that UK food is still lagging behind its European counterparts, both in terms of sales and reputation. So we sent our business reporter Nick Marsh to Asia's leading food and drinks trade show in Singapore to find out why. That is your business today. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Let's return now to the Middle East, where aid agencies say the closing of the 2 main crossings into southern Gaza makes it virtually impossible to assist civilians there. The United Nations says Israel isn't allowing humanitarian workers access to the Rafah crossing after taking control of the Gaza side of the border with Egypt. We can talk now to Dr. Nick Maynard, senior surgeon at Oxford University Hospital, who was one of the last to leave Rafah yesterday. He's been on regular trips to Gaza to carry out emergency work there. Dr. Maynard, thank you very much for your time today. And what was the situation like as you left Rafah? And you are watching BBC News. And just before we go, actually, let's just take you back to the House of Commons here in London, because I want to remind you that we are expecting a statement from the UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. This is about a statement about a hack which has compromised the payroll systems of the British Armed Forces. Now, government officials have told the BBC that China was most likely responsible. And of course, President Xi of China is in Europe at the moment. He's in France on a visit there. But the Chinese Foreign Ministry has dismissed these claims as absurd. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Now, there are no trains on some of the busiest commuter routes in the UK today because of a fresh strike by ASLEF train drivers. The industrial action mainly affects the south of England, with these operators hit, including South Western and the Gatwick Express. Tomorrow, it's a different set of operators which are affected, among them Avanti West Coast and Great Western. And then on Thursday, it's services in the north of England and Scotland that will be hit. Our transport correspondent Katie Austin has the latest. UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps making that statement about a hack of the payroll system of the British Armed Forces. This is an external network operated by a contractor. He pointed out that a number of actions have been taken as a result, including taking that system offline, a full investigation. And he talked about a malign actor being behind this. He said we cannot rule out state involvement. Government officials have told the BBC that China was most likely responsible, something the Chinese Foreign Ministry has dismissed as absurd, although Mr. Shapps didn't mention China specifically there, rather a malign actor, and said we cannot rule out state involvement. The adult film star at the centre of Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York has taken the stand as a witness. Prosecutors say Stormy Daniels received $130,000 from the hands of Mr. Trump's former lawyer at his direction before the 2016 presidential election in order to keep quiet about her allegations that she had sex with the former president. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records and denies a sexual encounter with Ms. Daniels. Well, let's speak to our North America correspondent, Annita, who is following the trial for us. And Annita, bring us up to date with what Stormy Daniels has been saying. Noga Tonopolsky, thank you very much for your thoughts on this story today. And you can follow all the latest on what's happening in Gaza, the situation on the ground and the response in Israel on the BBC News app and website. We've got a live page there with all the developments for you as they happen. And around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. President Vladimir Putin has been sworn in for a new 6-year term at a ceremony at the Kremlin. Putin, who's been in power as president or prime minister since 1999, now begins his new mandate more than 2 years after he sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine. In March, Vladimir Putin won a landslide victory in a tightly controlled election from which 2 anti-war candidates were barred on technical grounds. Britain, Canada and most European Union nations decided to boycott the swearing-in, but France said it would send its ambassador. And that was Tamsin O'Connor from Elle magazine talking to me earlier. Do stay with us here on BBC News. And this is BBC News, the headlines for you. John Swinney wins the nomination to be Scotland's First Minister. More than 800,000 children in England and Wales have spent the last year living in an abusive home, a new piece of research suggests. And we'll be looking at why England's largest lake, Windermere, turned bright green. Researchers think a high number of visitors could be to blame. Now, I just want to bring you some breaking news coming to us about TikTok and its Chinese parent company ByteDance, which have filed a lawsuit in a US federal court seeking to block a law signed by President Biden, which would force the sale of TikTok by its Chinese owners. The app is used by millions of people around the world, including 170 million Americans. The lawsuit says the sale of ByteDance, the sale of TikTok by ByteDance is simply not possible, not commercially, not technologically, and not legally. So TikTok's owners, the Chinese parent company ByteDance, has filed a lawsuit in the US seeking to block that law signed by President Biden. We'll have more on that story for you as we get more details. Right now, it's time for sport, and let's join Jane Dougal.
Hi there, Annita. We start with Nottingham Forest because their appeal against a 4-point deduction for breaking Premier League financial rules has been rejected. More details on all of those stories on the BBC Sport website and app, but that's all the sport for now. Annita.
Jane, thank you very much. John Swinney will become Scotland's 7th First Minister after being nominated by Parliament. The SNP leader succeeds Humza Yousaf, who resigned from office earlier today. Mr Swinney's appointment will be rubber-stamped by the King before he is officially sworn in at the Court of Session on Wednesday. Addressing politicians at Holyrood, he called for unity and pledged to govern for everyone. Thanks for your company over the last few hours. I'm on X at Annita BBC if you want to get in touch about any of our stories today. Meantime, do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Despite some cloud across northern areas,